Welcome to the TravelPulse podcast. Here's your host, Mark Murphy.
Hi, it's Mark Murphy, and yes, I'm back with the TravelPulse podcast. You may have tuned in last week, and hopefully you did, and you would have heard that I was doing my podcast from Cancun, Mexico. I was down there in the Cancun Riviera Maya region, and I was on the ground talking to travel agents, talking to travelers about the perception of Mexico prior to getting there and what they saw on the ground. Now, we'll be bringing you that footage because it was actually captured on video in the next couple of weeks. But in the meantime, let me share with you a good, bad, good airline story. I mean, let's face it. I like to bitch about the airlines. Everyone does, because we always feel like if it isn't one thing, it's another. If it isn't an extra baggage fee, which, you know what, I'm going to riff on that for a second. Just as a side note, did you notice how this always happens? This has been going on for decades. I mean, I've been in the space since 1991. And let me tell you, every time one carrier makes a move, for the most part, that initial carrier makes a move, raises a fee, raises a fare on a certain route, and then, like dominoes, everybody follows. Now, they've looked into it. There isn't collusion, but when you have an oligopoly, meaning a handful of carriers control 80% of all air traffic in the U.S., you pretty much can do whatever the hell you damn well please. So we're watching baggage fees go up. That's in part to offset the rising cost of fuel. And so I have no problem with the airlines charging fees, because if the planes are full and they can't fit another person on, they're probably not charging enough. So ironically, when I go on and speak on different shows, every once in a while, one of those shows which, you know, for instance, Your World with Neil Cavuto, I always enjoy going on with Neil, but has been a while because all they want to talk about is freaking politics. But at the same time, when I do go on with him, I push back on the airline argument because Neil hates the airlines, makes it really clear how annoyed he is with the airlines, you know, in general. But at the same time, I push back with, well, it's capitalism, isn't it? And if they can get away with charging $500 to check a bag, they're sure as hell going to do it. And what business wouldn't if the demand is there? So the trade-off is obviously not a lot of competition on a lot of routes, and the fact that when the market's controlled 80% by 5 airlines, well, it's going to be very difficult to push back on that because you really don't have any other choices unless you want to drive or stay home. But anyway, back to a good story. So I flew back from Cancun on flight 805, and it was Friday, September 7th. And the flight got off right on time, about 3 hours in the air to Philadelphia. And then we landed in Philadelphia, only to be met by thunderstorms and lightning on the ground, which, if you don't know it, when you have lightning in the vicinity, the blue lights go on at the jetway, and that's where you board and, you know, disembark a plane. And that's a sign that says you cannot, as a ground person, baggage handler, you know, the guys that bring the planes in and guide them in, the guys who operate the tow rigs, they are not allowed out on the tarmac. And what that means is you're sitting there. So unfortunately, this delay had us sitting on the runway for 3 hours and 15 minutes by my best estimation. We landed around 7 p.m. We did not get off the damn plane till 10:15. Now, ballpark 10:15. I might be off by 15 minutes or so, but that's what I recall. Now, anyway, we got off the plane, and one of the things I was shocked about is how cool everybody on the plane was. Now, maybe that's because they just got back from a great vacation in Mexico. I mean, hey, maybe people were drinking tequila and it was still pumping through their bloodstream. But in reality, I think people have come to realize that there are things that are outside of the control of the airlines and outside of their control. And, luckily for us, we have things like iPads and iPhones, so people could keep themselves entertained. What I did, I sat back, I had my iPad out, and I watched virtually all of Godfather 2, which is, I think, 3.5 hours. Didn't quite finish it, but got pretty darn close to finishing it. And I streamed it on my iPad. It was freaking, just like going to the movie. In fact, I had a decent seat. I got a free upgrade because of how much I fly. So I was sitting in their little mini first class, if you can call it that, on American. But it was a hell of a lot more comfortable than coach. And with my iPad, I had the iPad Pro, the big screen. I was watching the movie in high def. So that was surprising. I mean, I was totally chill, and I realized that everybody on the plane was chill, even though a lot of people were going to miss connections, etc., assuming that the plane that they were supposed to get on was able to push back and get off the ground, because I did see some flights taken off. So I think there were a lot of really cool heads on that plane and a lot of good sports. And they realized it was outside of the control of the airline, and so be it. You just kind of, so it goes. Like Kurt Vonnegut in Slaughterhouse-Five. You read that book. The theme throughout is bad stuff happens, and the main character, it's basically so it goes. And I think that's a good way to look at travel. Things just go awry at times, and you just go with the flow. So that was pretty cool. Now, here's what sucked. This just sucked. Get off the damn plane, go to baggage claim. There are literally no other passengers in the international baggage claim. And the damn luggage, despite the fact that there's no more warnings and lightning, so therefore we know that the ground guys are out there at Philadelphia Airport. Over an hour and 15 minutes later, almost an hour and a half later, out popped the luggage. That is absurd. I mean, it wasn't a full flight. Me and another guy, we could have gone down and offloaded the damn plane and got the bags into the terminal in about 20 minutes. Two guys who didn't know what the hell they were doing. We could have done that. And I just don't understand Philadelphia Airport. For those of you who fly in and out of Philly, great airport to get in and out of, as long as you got pre-check. But the baggage, I got to tell you, I think it's the worst in the damn country. I don't know what the hell it is with Philadelphia. Any day, I rarely see a bag come out in under 45 minutes or an hour, which there's really no excuse for that in today's transportation world. So, Philly, baggage handlers, get your shit together. Because, we sat on the plane for 3 hours plus, and then to have to sit in the, arrival area for international baggage and sit there for over an hour to claim our bags when there are only about 50 passengers that had bags, that's just freaking ludicrous. So, anyway, good news about the airlines, bad news about the airport. It is what it is. Now, speaking of airlines, did you see the news this week? I mean, just news that just broke on a flight from San Francisco to Boise, Idaho. Did you hear about the woman who got up mid-flight about 100 miles outside of Boise, claiming to be God, screaming, "I am God, I am God," and trying to open the door in flight? Now, the good news is with pressurization, not going to happen. Bad news is freaked everybody on the damn airplane out, and luckily some passengers tackled her, threw her to the ground. She got zip-tied, boom, arrested. I'm sure she's in the shrink ward right now because anybody screaming "I am God" trying to open the plane's got some mental issues, and unfortunately, pre-check doesn't cover mental issues when it comes to travelers. So we'll just have to wait and see what happened there. But scary moment for those people on that flight, and luckily those passengers jumped into action and took down the nut job. And hopefully she'll get her. Oh yeah, I can't say that because I might trigger somebody. Sorry about that. Yeah, she's a freaking nut job, claiming to be God, and I have no empathy for that. Just get some help. If you're that crazy, get some freaking help. And people, if you know people like this, Get them help. Intervene. Intervention. Anyway, sorry to offend. Pre-check. You know what? I just talked about pre-check. Yeah, pre-check doesn't check for mental issues, but pre-check can be mentally draining. For instance, you get into your pre-check line and you're looking at it and you're saying, how the hell is the pre-check line longer than the regular line? And why are they taking people from the regular line and sticking them in the pre-check line? Or better yet, when the regular line is way backed up, they're picking off passengers and saying, hey, come on over here, come on over here. And you, the traveler, who's paid your fee, who is, subjected yourself for the global, if you're doing it through global entry, to a interview with a customs official, to, on top of that, getting fingerprinted and background checked, and paying, the fee, of course. You've done all these steps, and you've done it all right. Yet, here comes Mary and Joe, who are going on their one trip every 5 years, and bam, they're in front of you. And another one's in front of you. And another one's in front of you. That is infuriating. So, what did the folks in Congress do? Well, they are pushing legislation. I think it just passed the House, and we'll see what happens to it. It's called Pre-Check is Pre-Check. But in my case, for my flight today, taking a flight today down to Fort Lauderdale, Mark Murphy, who flies literally every week. Last week I flew back and forth to Cancun. A week before that, I think I flew, I don't know where the hell I flew. I flew somewhere. I don't know how many flights I've been on in the last 6 or 7 weeks, but I would say that not less than 10 flights in the last 6 weeks. Now, most people will do 10 flights in 5 years. One vacation, round trip a year. I did 10 minimum. I'm probably undercounting in about 6 weeks. But lo and behold, pre-check. I got my boarding pass and I looked at it. I don't have freaking pre-check today. So what does that mean? Well, that means the multi-million miler guy who travels every freaking week is going to be in the the cattle line with everybody else. The guy who travels once every 5 years, the guy that's never been on a freaking airplane. I'm going to be there with them because I could pose a threat. Therefore, they have to randomly pull me out at different times. I mean, seriously? FYI, it's not random when I know I'm not going through pre-check and I'm going through the regular thing with the liquids, the shoes off, the belt. If I was actually a terrorist or a guy intent on doing something wrong, FYI, you check in, you get your boarding pass. It says no pre-check. Therefore, the guy who's up to no good, who's going to do some harm, do you think he's still going to try to get through? No. I mean, it's the dumbest thing. It is so freaking stupid. It's the old saying that, if you take your shoes off, we're going to be safer. That's horseshit as well. It's designed to, quote, make you feel safer. How in the hell does pulling me out of pre-check, on a random basis with 24 hours notice, how in the hell does that accomplish anything? And by the way, it's a rhetorical freaking question. It doesn't accomplish jack. But that's one of the things that they do. Now, case in point, when you fly back from Mexico, and I think I've been to Mexico 3 times in the last 6 weeks as part of this, you don't take your damn shoes off. So let's go back and think about that. For what, like over a decade now in the U.S., we go from Boston to New York. Take your shoes off, take your belt off, blah, blah, blah. But let's focus on the shoes. However, the shoe bomber, which prompted all of this shoe removal at security, for regular security, you don't have to do it with pre-check, that was prompted based on an inbound flight from Paris to Detroit, if I recall properly. And he tried to light his shoe on fire, which had an explosive, over Detroit. Well, ever since then, everybody that gets on a plane, millions and millions of passengers, have to take the damn shoes off. But if I'm flying in from Mexico, I don't have to take my shoes off. Now, let me ask you a question. Do you think the bad guys know that you don't have to take your freaking shoes off in Mexico if you want to enter the U.S. on a flight? Yeah, they're not stupid. So again, what is the point? So you're going to make an American citizen get on a plane, travel, or anybody, travel domestically within the U.S. and go through the all the rigmarole, but at the same time, you're going to let anybody and their brother get on a plane come to the U.S. without taking the shit off Mexico. What do the Mexicans know that we don't know? Think about that. And if that was such a critical thing, why in the hell are they letting passengers board with having shoes on in Mexico if it's not okay to do it domestically in the U.S. for an inbound flight to the United States? Makes no freaking sense. But again, pre-check is pre-check, except when it isn't. And I'll be standing with all you, seasonal travelers or off-season travelers for September, of course. I'll be hanging out with you guys in the extra long line this morning. Hopefully it'll be a little less crazy because I'm going out a little bit later. But yeah, I have to get to the airport earlier, etc. Not thrilled, bitching, you got it. Which leads me to some funny stuff. So I was thinking about some of the questions that travelers are asking. And there's some great ones. There's some really great questions. And if you get a chance, travel agents are at the forefront of hearing some of the dumbest questions you've ever heard when it comes to travel. But it's not just, and by the way, it's not U.S. travelers or UK travelers or German travelers, et cetera. It's travelers, plural, globally. And to be frank, I know in the U.S. we're geographically challenged. I know in some other countries people, have a lot of ridiculous questions. I believe this was a traveler from the U.K., and they wanted to ask, they actually posed a question to folks at the Miami Convention and Visitor Bureau, which is, which beach is closest to the ocean? Now, that's... Yeah, that's just a ridiculous question. So I thought that was pretty funny. Which beach is closest to the ocean? All right. And speaking of oceans, if you want to get to Hawaii, you got to fly, folks. You can't rent a car. There is not a bridge to Hawaii. And if you're an American, you don't need a passport to go to Hawaii, which is one of the things that somebody stated. They said, hey, I want to go to Hawaii, but I don't have a passport. FYI, it's part of the United States. You can go. You don't need a passport. You just need some government ID to get on the damn plane to get there, unless you're taking a cruise. In that case, if it's hitting like a Mexican port before it goes, yeah, you're going to need a passport for that cruise. But otherwise, if you're flying, and you're an American, you don't need a freaking passport. In fact, if you have any kind of government-issued ID, you don't need anything other than that, like a driver's license to go. Ironically, Hawaii and Alaska get a lot of ridiculous questions. So in both cases, people want to know what currency they take in Hawaii as well as Alaska. And that's been asked numerous times. So if you're a traveler, please be informed. Alaska is also part of the United States, and you don't need a passport there either. And you certainly can bring your dollars there, folks, because it's a U.S. state. It's one of the states in the United States, and they do speak English, FYI. Now, of course, in places like Alaska, you have a lot of native languages, but folks, it's America. They speak English. And the same is true for Hawaii. If you go to Hawaii, you don't need to learn a new language, and you're not going to be struggling in communicating with the folks who live there because they're just like you, and they speak English. So you'll have no problem. Now, I've looked at some interesting places to go to. And one of the places I went that is, I think it's on everyone's bucket list. I know the desire to go to this place is strong with Americans. They all want to go there. But many times they say, I want to go, but they don't actually make that final commitment and book it and go. It's a dream destination, but the perception is it's so far away that despite huge psychographic and demographic reasons for people to want to go and who've indicated they want to go, the actual completion of travel is very much on the low side. That place is Australia. It is a fantastic destination. I was fortunate to go to the Sydney 2000 Olympics and see some of the country. I was there for the Olympics. I went out to the wine country outside of Sydney, did some interesting stuff. Nothing crazy, but we were mostly there for the Olympic venue. Now, that was amazing to watch the Olympics, to see, in particular, the swimming, which Australia is big and at this time was huge with swimming. And that was super exciting. I never thought watching swimming could be that exciting, and it was unbelievable. But I have to laugh when I saw this question. Travelers asking, what time does the sun come up in Australia? Seriously? What time does the sun come up? Yeah, they ask these questions. It comes up in the frickin' morning, folks. Just because it's on the other side of the earth doesn't mean it's coming up at, midnight or 6 p.m. instead of 6 a.m. You can check weather.com. It'll tell you when the sun's coming up, and it's going to come up in the morning, just like it does here. Nothing different. But that was one of the things that people were asking about. And again, there's so many crazy stories. People bitching about the color of the sand. It looked yellow in the brochure, but it's actually white. Or, they book a beach vacation and they said it was a terrible vacation because there was too much sand. And you can see some of these reviews on TripAdvisor and other places, which, again, I talked about that last week with TripAdvisor. Reviews from folks that aren't on the same planet as you might be in terms of their take on a destination or on a resort. So everything with a grain of salt, or a grain of sand for that matter. And if you don't want the sand and you don't like the sand, or you're afraid the color's not going to be the right sand, the right color for you and your sand desires, let's say, then head north. I mean, we talked about Mexico a couple of times. Great deals in Mexico. But this fall, shoot up to our neighbor to the north. I look at Canada and I think of, just spectacular scenery. Fall's a great time to travel because it's still not freezing cold up there, which it will become very quickly. The deals are unbelievable. It's about a 35% difference in cost from 5 years ago, just based on the strength of the dollar, the US dollar, in terms of what it buys up there. And you can go in the off season for chump change, but you just want to be flexible, because if you're going to Toronto and there's a citywide convention or something big going on, it's going to cost more for a hotel room. It's going to cost more for your air travel. But if you want to go and you're flexible and, let's say, leave on a Sunday and come back on a Wednesday, or just look at the dates. One of the best things to look at in terms of flights, just to get an idea, is Google Flights, because it'll show you day by day what the best fares are, and then you can click in and see what the airlines are. But even with that tool, keep in mind, like Google Flights, if Southwest is an option, you're not going to see it on Google Flights. People don't realize that. They'll see, Spirit, they'll see American, they'll see United, they'll see, let's say, Air Canada, whatever. But let's say Southwest has good fares and flies nonstop on that route. You're never going to know it. You'd have to go to the southwest.com website to actually look into it. That's why I use a travel agent. Whenever I'm looking to book travel, I always try to turn to somebody who can take the extra time to do the work so I don't have to. And that's the beauty of a great travel agent, and something I would encourage you to seek out, because travel agents do add value. They cost nothing because the travel supplier pays them, and they pay them based on the same price whether you book direct with the supplier, or not. And the reason they do that is they want what's called price parity. They want the price to be equal no matter where you're looking to book. So if you want to book on Expedia, and I'll do this on my next podcast, I'll get into sites like Expedia and Priceline, etc. Most people don't realize it. They're freaking travel agencies. They're travel agencies, but they're self-service travel agencies. And if you're okay with that, great. But God forbid you want some planning advice, you're not going to get it from any of those folks. You're going to be talking to, if you talk to anybody, you're going to be talking to a call center, some agent reading off a script, let's say in Omaha, Nebraska. No offense to my friends in Omaha, But, talking to a travel agent / reservationist for a firm like Expedia or an online travel site like Expedia, I want to talk to somebody maybe in my local market, and maybe somebody who's got some bona fides and somebody who individually has personal reviews that say they know what the hell they're doing. Then I've got some confidence in that outreach. But some random person that I can't even put a face with, I'm okay with that. No thanks. So Canada, great travel deals. Take a look going north. And also, the last thing I'll leave you with is this. Right now we've got a hurricane bearing down on the East Coast. So a lot of people that are outside the East Coast, that might be traveling, you're not really worried about it. Today I'm going to fly down. I'll be flying over, North Carolina and South Carolina, which are in the line of fire right now. And, it's not going to affect me. I'm going to Florida. From Florida, I'm going to go back to New York later this week. And then, actually tomorrow. So today I fly to Florida, Fort Lauderdale. Tomorrow I fly from Miami to New York. If you're on some regional TV outlets, you might see me Thursday morning, September 13th, on your local TV station. I'll be on a lot of morning shows. I'm going to do about 22 or 23 TV interviews and 8 or 9 radio interviews over a 6-hour stretch. It's going to be a little bit of a marathon, talking fall travel, deals, etc. So, and Canada will be one of the things I'll be highlighting, as well as Mexico, as well as some other cool ideas, maybe even some river cruising ideas that I'm looking at. But with that said, you have to factor in, even if you're not flying on the East Coast, even if you're not planning on flying, let's say, into Charlotte, which is going to be shut down based on what's coming, that's going to have an impact potentially all the way across the country. What people don't realize is that when a major hub, let's say like Charlotte for American Airlines, gets whacked, or flights in and out of other airports get impacted, it creates a domino effect. Now, that domino effect spreads depending on how wide the area that's impacted. But imagine a plane that's going to be flying, let's say, from Philadelphia down to Charlotte, doesn't get to Charlotte. That means it doesn't pick up people in Charlotte and end up taking them to Vegas. And that means the people in Vegas waiting to fly, let's say, to Dallas, which that equipment was going to be scheduled for, their flight from Vegas to Dallas gets canceled. And people are going, well, hold on a second. The weather in Dallas is great. The weather in Vegas is great. How in the hell did my trip get canceled? Well, you just got the explanation. It got canceled because of a domino effect. And if it's super widespread, what you're going to find is that it'll take about 72 hours following the storm's, path where it comes in, impacts travel, and then exits. Up to 72 hours after that event takes place, you will still have delays and cancellations. And because of potential fines that airlines will get hit with on a per passenger basis, which is tens of thousands of dollars per passenger, which is millions and millions of dollars per aircraft, should people get held on the ground or delayed on the tarmac and they make a bad decision to push back, but they don't take off for 4, 5, 6 hours. We've heard this in the past. The Department of Transportation is going to fine them. They're going to get hit with a massive fine. So instead of dealing with a massive fine, they just proactively cancel the flight. And you'll find that even way before this storm hits that area, they're going to be proactively canceling flights and repositioning that aircraft in order to alleviate that domino effect, but it's still going to happen. And so just be prepared, be patient, be like the people on Flight 805 from Cancun to Philadelphia. Things go awry. You can't control Mother Nature. It just can't. They can't even tell us today, within 48 hours of landfall, where this stuff's going to hit. And that's the challenge with weather. You really can't. And we've seen a lot of these predictions over the years just go by the wayside, and you just got to be prepared for any eventuality. And if you're in the path, you need to get the hell out, because it could be a catastrophic storm, and hopefully it's a lot of hype and it doesn't materialize. But boy, we've seen it with Harvey. We saw it with Katrina. We've seen it with Maria. We've got to make sure that people, first and foremost, stay safe. So if you're in the path, make sure you're on high ground, you're in a safe area, and seek shelter if you can't get out, because the winds are expected to be north of 140 miles per hour. So you're going to have wind damage. You're going to have massive flooding. You're going to have pretty much a catastrophic event. But let's hope that the predictions for that are going to be over-exaggerated and you guys come through it okay. We'll be thinking about you, praying for you. And in the meantime, I'm praying that my flight gets there on time to Fort Lauderdale today and gets me back to New York tomorrow ahead of any issues that are storm-related. And then I'll be coming to you next week from Cancun, because I will be in Cancun once again next week. And I'll be checking out the all-new Xcaret Hotel. And if you've heard of Xcaret, Xcaret has parks that are really cool, amazing natural parks in the Riviera Maya region of Mexico, just south of the Cancun airport. And they have this ridiculous hotel that I'm going to be talking about next week on my podcast, because I'm going to be staying there. I've only spent a couple hours checking it out so far, so I'll give you a full report on my podcast next week, because I'll be doing it right from Hotel Xcaret. Until then, have a great one.